I'm here because I am a roaring lion crying out righteousness. I want to talk a little bit about our economy, where we are, because we need to learn how to protect ourselves. And quite frankly, those of us who keep God's word will be protected, because we got some difficult financial times coming, mainly because it happens every 15 to 20 years. You know, these Wall Street people, they get greedy. They want to buy bigger yachts. They're just greedy. They got millions of dollars and they want millions more. And so I think what happened with Silicon Valley Bank out there in California the other day, last week, was mainly because of the corporate leaders of the bank got greedy and caused its stock prices to fall, or its capital to dwindle. But Moody's Analytical, which is a pretty respectful economic forecasting outfit, makes a lot of money. A lot of people rely on Moody's Analytical in terms of whether they're going to build in Saudi Arabia, whether they're going to build in Dubai, or whether they're going to build in America. They're going to invest billions of dollars in Spartanburg, South Carolina, to build a BMW plant. They check with Moody's Analytical, and they make a ton of money all over the world advising people on global economic structure. So they're pretty well stable, and since they get paid so much money, they don't jerk people's chain. They don't lie. And usually what Moody's Analytical statements, what statements they issue, you can pretty much take to the bank. If they say the economy is going to be good, then, you can pretty much bank that we're going to have a good economy over the period of time with which they say it will. If they say the economy is going to be bad, well, you better look out. Anyway, Moody's Analytical, I think the chairman CEO was on yesterday making some statements. I'm going to ask the engineer to bring it up, because we want to try to decipher from this how to protect ourselves, because we got some bad economic times that are coming. Mr. Engineer, roll that segment, please.
First one there was Moody's changing its rating on the U.S. financial system, lowering its outlook, I should say, to negative from stable. What we just heard from Moody's, I guess first just talk to us about the significance of this.
Yeah, it's giving me vibes back to covering that 2008-2009 crisis. And then ultimately, of course, when the U.S. credit rating got downgraded, I believe in 2011, my first thought when I saw this was the cost of credit is going up. And it's not just going up likely for banks. It could go up for many households. If you want to go out and buy a pair of jeans on a credit card, your cost of credit may go up, in large part because you see Moody's here lowering their outlook on banks. Now, the significance is essentially this. Moody's is essentially saying this SVB situation and Signature Bank will have adverse effects on funding, liquidity, earnings, and capital. Another way of looking at that is Moody's has less confidence in the earnings potential and the returns potential for the banks. And when that happens, what are banks likely to do? Raise their own prices for their various services so they can help fund their business. They pass those costs on to consumers, essentially us.
Fair. Are any of these banks of similar profile, though, to SVB in a high number of uninsured deposits?
Oh, I sure hope not, because my money's in Bank of America, Dave. All right. And that, right. That is part of the list here that Moody's highlights. They're looking at the entire banking system. First name of bank on here is Bank of New York Mellon. You have JP Morgan, you have Bank of America. Now, of course, those companies, you look at JP Morgan, they're known as having a fortress balance sheet. Of course, they're not in the same boat as SVB, but still, Moody's is making a broad brush statement saying, as a result of the situation, it'll have ripple effects in the earnings for all the banks, even if you're healthy, will likely be impacted this year.
One bank in particular, the Bank of New York Mellon, as you know, they are the ones that have been giving us this, if you will, foreclosure issue for several years. Right now, they're not in the best position. All banks, it doesn't matter how big you are, the bigger you are, the harder you fall. I thought it would be important for us to understand, and I'm going to replay that clip a little bit later on. In the event you're not really into economics, and I look for news that I think my audience will be interested in hearing. And I know our audience is interested in the price of eggs, the price of milk, the price of gasoline, the cost of living. If you got to rent an apartment now, it's through the roof. If you got to buy something right now, a pair of jeans, the cost is going to go up. So I'm going to run this again at the back end of what I have to say so you can kind of get a second bite at this apple. But I want to point out that Mellon Bank is not in a position right now to be talking trash. I can tell you that, even though they got $52 trillion. They're not in anybody's position to talk trash as some sort of a monster of a bank. I want to point that out. But the other item is this: need to know that, and I'm ambivalent about whether I want to urge you. It's always a good thing to pay down your credit card debt. Credit card debt can be from 18% to 24%. Credit card debt is always horrendous. It's very easy to give them that card and they'll charge it, and you're going to pay 25%, extra 20. You're going to pay a quarter on every dollar that you borrow. You buy a pair of jeans for $10, you're going to pay $2.50 in interest if you don't pay it off soon enough. That's a lot of money going to these banks. That's a ton of money. When they got that going on 24/7, the people use those credit cards. So if you run up a credit card debt, if you use the card, try to pay it before the interest accrues. If not, try to pay down your credit card debt. My concern now is to whether or not to advise you, and I'll give some more prayer to this, whether it's, let's say, for instance, you owe a bank a credit card $10,000, and the interest is already played into that part, into that $10,000. I would normally advise, go ahead and pay it down to $7,000. But right now, it might be better to take that $3,000 and pay cash because of the interest rate that are being charged banks and banks charging customers, and then the supplier also charging more money for their products because they're buying on credit as well. So my ambivalence here in terms of teaching us how to survive this, we've got a sweltering economic crisis coming, a recession that may lead to a depression. When you hear about banks going belly up, collapsing, Signature Bank in California, another bank called Swift Gate Bank also in California, and Silicon Valley Bank also in California, those three banks went belly up. And there are 6 other banks that are on the short list. Look like they're going to be going up. And Credit Suisse just reported this morning, their shares hit a record low. They're 20%. Let's say, for instance, Credit Suisse had 1,000 shares selling at $1,000. Their share now is down to $800. They lost 20% overnight when Saudi Arabia took some of its money from Credit Suisse. And Credit Suisse is a giant banking system, with banking and processing and funding money all over the world. So you got Credit Suisse is in trouble. Mellon Bank is also in trouble. Chase, J.P. Morgan Chase, the liquidity of what's happening with them, those banks, is always very, very threatening. So, and if these banks start crashing and money gets more expensive and Jerome Powell constantly raising the interest rate, you're going to find some difficult financial times. Trying to feed yourself, and jobs, businesses are going to close. So I want to be able to say that to you, but that's not all that's going on right now in our economy. We've got the bank, of course, the Silicon Valley Bank. We got the price of food that is stubbornly staying high. I mean, you go to the supermarket, we buy food for the children here at school, and those numbers have been 20% above what they were a year ago. They say the price of food has increased by as much as 9% at one point, down to 6%. But when I look at the bills, it's like 20% more than what we were spending a year ago. Now we're going to keep on buying the food. I'm not trying to say we're going to stop buying food or going to cut short the eggs or the bread or the milk or the oranges. We ain't going to do that. We just got to have more resources to buy it. But for your home as well, the prices of things have gone through the roof. And now we got, coupled with a tanking economy, we've got the looming indictments that are going to come. I think Fannie Willis is going to indict down in Georgia. I think Alvin Bragg going to indict here in New York City. You're going to have 2 indictments by the spring of the year before we get to Easter to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus. We may have Trump indicted twice. Now, it's not bad news for Trump. Let me just say that I'm not on Trump's side or on his team, on his Trump train. I'm not on that. But, and then, of course, you got trouble over there in, I'm going to raise the question a little bit later on, what would America look like if Trump becomes president again? That's the next segment. All you have to do now is look at what's going on in Israel with Benjamin Netanyahu's under indictment, while he's the prime minister, but yet he's indicted and facing jail time. Well, I'll get to that a little bit later on today or tomorrow. But what I wanted to be able to do to say to you is that, you're going to have to trust in the Lord, because the times that are coming, America's having financial problems, economic problems, that will be bad enough on its own. But the very fact we're going to have an uprising in America like we've never seen before when Trump gets indicted, it's going to make him more popular. may even give him the presidency again. And he's probably going to get indicted by Merrick Garland. Jack Smith is looking at what happened, the documents down in Mar-a-Lago. Everybody's closely looking at what's happening in January 6th and what role Trump played. Mike Pence has said that Trump's reckless words put his life and the life of his family in danger. We don't know how far Mike Pence is going to go to try to grab the presidency, whether he'd be willing to give up more of Trump's statements. So we're living in some very difficult time, not to mention we got the war in Ukraine, and we got Russia and China, Gog and Magog, uniting, getting together because Nancy Pelosi went over there with her crazy self. When Xi Jinping told her, don't come to Taiwan, don't come, she went with her crazy self anyway. And now Xi Jinping is wondering whether or not he's going to be able to, when he's going to march on Taiwan the way, Putin marched on the Ukraine. So we're living in some very difficult political times, and a lot of unrest is everywhere in America. So watch your money, pray a lot. I'll try to be back with more concrete as I'm going to look at some more of the economic people, what their statements are. And I'll try to give you some really, some ways in which you can protect yourself beyond, God's protection of you, the Lord's protection of you. There's some things that we ought to know as common sense that we ought to be able to do as well. But I want to be able to, we're going back to court this week, and there have been a couple of people have warned me that there are people out to get me. And one fella called in, I think we got his tape, and another woman, people have called in to tell me I need to learn how to protect myself from what is going on. And so I want you to be able to hear that. I think this man's voice is important. And we have been running this on our broadcast now for some time, that a woman called in and said that the work that we're doing is a great work. And then after that, I'm going to let you read a couple of tweets about how our school is doing and how our members are growing and the wonderful things that are happening here at the church. If were you a part of the ATLAH Church some years ago and maybe you're not here anymore, some really wonderful things are happening to us now. To God be the glory. But it's been some really, really very, very exciting times. And I'm thankful to the Lord for that as well. And then in the next block of the next segment, we're going to be looking at what's happening with Letitia James, who's the Attorney General for the state of New York, and all these drag queen shows that are being, what is going on in the world today, I tell you, is just beyond belief. But I'm going to ask Daniel to bring up, if you will, what he has to bring up for us to be able to get and I'm going to ask you to pray for me. The Apostle Paul asked for prayer quite a bit. Jesus wasn't so big on asking anybody to pray for him. But I'm going to ask you to pray for me, because I tell the truth. I do. I tell the truth. And Pastor Bartolotta's son, Paul, called me Pastor Truth. It's what he called me. I'm going to ask you to pray for me. And the other thing I'm going to say to you is this. You're going to need to listen to me. Some very difficult times are getting ready to hit. And by the way, it has nothing really to do with Trump. It has everything to do with the tribulation and with the word of God. It could be anybody. But some difficult times are getting ready. And if you're not prepared, if you're not ready, if your house is not in order, if you need to get right with Jesus. I'm telling you now, he's an old preacher man, don't tell me about that Jesus and the Bible and that old phony God up in the sky. I'm going to tell you something. Now I'm going to tell you, you need to get right with Jesus. Why you got the chance? Because this time next month, you could be 6 foot under. Or the ones you love could be 6 foot under. Now what you going to do? Now what you going to do?